Nice to be with you. I'm not a native Bradford County necessarily, but I've spent a lot of my life here. I raised my kids in South Waverly, and before that I lived in Towanda for the first part of my illustrious married career, and I worked for the Bradford County Conservation District for a little while back in those days. It was quite a while back. So besides playing music for a living, I've spent a lot of time on the little byways and whatnot of how to get around the northern tier, Pennsylvania, the southern tier of New York. You could ask me directions anywhere, I can tell you how to get there. And only occasionally am I wrong. Right? So, never wrong. Sometimes you can find a better way. Anyway, a little something from Stephen Foster, as I mentioned, just to it's a song to sigh the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days I have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears, while we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. It's a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Oh, hard times come again no more. It's a sigh that is wafted across the ocean wave. It's a wail that breaks upon the shore. It's a prayer that is murmured around the lonely grave. Oh, hard times come again no more. It's a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Oh, hard times come again no more. It seemed like an appropriate song to start with. Written by a poet named David Hogg. That's, if I remember correctly. Does that sound right? H-O-G-G. You can look it up. Anyway, and you can always call me back to inform me, and I won't answer the phone. But I believe it was David Hogg. He wrote this back in the 1700s when the English decided to take away the local Scottish Parliament. So the folks in Scotland had to live under the combined Parliament of England and Scotland rather than having their own Parliament. Same thing, of course, happened in Ireland a few years later, but they decided that one Parliament in England was better than letting those wild and woolly Scots up there have their own Parliament. And the Scots, some of them went along with it. What do you know? And so here we go. Then the melody was put onto it by a name Dick Gagan back in the 1970s when they were trying to vote for Scottish freedom again. River Tweed is the river that separates England from Scotland, anyway. What's the spring breathing jasmine and rose? What's the summer we always get rain? What's the splendor of autumn to those who bargained their freedom for gain? Let the love of our land's sacred right to the love of our people succeed. Let friendship and honor unite and flourish on both sides of Tweed. No sweetness the senses can cheer, while corruption and bribery bind. No brightness that gloom can e'er clear, for honor's the sum of the mind. Let the love of our land's sacred right to the love of our people succeed. Let friendship and honor unite and flourish on both sides the Tweed. Let virtue distinguish the brave, make riches of lowest degree. Think them poorest who can be a slave, them richest who dare to be free. Let the love of our land's sacred right to the love of our people succeed. Let friendship and honor unite and flourish on both sides of Tweed. Let friendship and honor unite and flourish on both sides the Tweed. Write me a letter and send it by mail. Send it in care of Birmingham jail. Birmingham jail. Birmingham jail. Send it in care of Birmingham jail. Send it in care of Tawanda City Jail. Down in the valley so low. Hang your head over, hear the wind blow.
The difference between a tangerine and a Scotsman.
You can get a drink out of a tangerine.
Of the sacred ground, and it's bowling over three things, or even more than that: our history, our environment, and our safety. And it's all being just sort of squandered, is the way that I see it. I've spent most of my life here in Wylusing. My family's been here for 5 generations, and I'm saying that because I've been writing these letters to the editor, and I live in Ithaca now, but I still have my property here in Wyalusing, and one of the letters was trying to distance me. Oh, he's up there in Ithaca, and you can, why don't you just stay up there in Ithaca and write your letters to the editor in Ithaca. And I thought that was rather mean-spirited, but I continued to write my letters anyway. But I'm very disappointed with our township supervisors that this whole thing has been allowed to go through. It seemed like it went through without much public input or discourse. There was no public meeting, and so I was very dismayed about that. These township supervisors one of them was my high school teacher, and they're people that I've known my whole life, and And I love this land. It's, you know, it's where I'm from, and I can't imagine somebody doing that to the land that they grew up in and the land that they love. So I'm very disappointed with my fellow Bradford Countyans and people in Wylusing. So once again, thank you for coming and for your support. Okay, so maybe I'll give you a few minutes to take a little break. I was just going to, Pat did this wonderful video presentation a couple of years ago, and he wrote this original song called The Hills Around My Home, and he put my paintings to his song. It was really a heartfelt thing. I was really honored that he did that, and it's on my, or the North Star Gallery. That's my website in Ithaca. So if you go to the North Side, then you go to my blog. It's down at the bottom of my blog. It's really a wonderful, in the spirit of today, a tribute to this agrarian culture in the land here. So check it out on northstarartgallery.com. Okay, this slide presentation line I'm calling the soul of the river and the town of people. And part of the subtext or the reason is that I think we've sold our soul. I include myself in it too, because we have not been able to prevent our beautiful land, our sacred land, falling into an industrial onslaught here. The color is not so good on these paintings. It's a new technology for me. It makes me think of the wonderful color slides my father took, and Paul Simon's song Kodachrome. You just can't beat those old 35 millimeter slides.
Should we turn the light?
Yeah, I guess you could, yeah. But this is a recent painting I just did it this August, and I've created this instructional DVD. Okay, thank you. And I did these plein air paintings along the Susquehanna River, and this is right down at the. Either way is fine. You can leave it on or off. I've done these plein air paintings, and I photographed myself, or had Linda videotape me. So I made this instructional DVD. I don't think there's anything like it, a plein air painting on the Susquehanna River. And this painting was done right across from where Endless Mountains Outfitter was. I painted maybe 30 paintings here over the course of my career, maybe more. And Dave and I used to, every summer solstice, we used to sit there and have a glass of wine and watch the sun go down through this special little notch in the river here. But experiencing the river there is a special thing. The ambiance and the birds and the fauna. And when I was doing another one here, I actually saw a bear go across the river. So these are the magical things that I'm sure will be lost. This is not my painting, but it's a wonderful painting. It's a little out of focus. Unfortunately, I don't know the artist, but it's a painting of Etienne Brulé, the first American that came through here, a Frenchman that came through here in 1615. And when I'm paddling on the river, I've been paddling on the river since I was 14. My grandparents on my mother's side, they had cottages or homes in Omit's Ferry, Standing Stone, and not Black Walnut, but Quick's Bend. And so whenever I'm on the river, I often think, you know, it looks pretty much like it did when Etienne Brulé was here. Even though there's towns, you go through Towanda and Athens, but it always has a bank of trees, and so it's fun to imagine that we're back 400 years ago. Okay, this is a painting that I did. I was commissioned by the WCC. That's the organization that did the restoration on this building, and it's the Battle of Lime Hill. It was part of the Revolutionary War where the Indians got on the wrong side, and let's see, they got on the side of the British, and this was an incident that happened just outside of town. But I have it here because it's another aspect of our history that could easily be bowled over by the fracking company, just like they did in Friedenshutten, our history, our heritage, and the sacred sites. And this one on Lime Hill, which is just back towards Towanda, could be another one that falls to the axe. These are two paintings of Sugar Run, right at Dave Buck's former site, the Endless Mountains Outfitters. The top one is looking upstream or west, and the bottom one at sunset, and the bottom one's looking downstream at sunrise. And these are right across from the site of this proposed LNG. And if that thing goes through, which it looks like it probably will, it'll be greatly compromised. It'll be like 265 acres over there with lights, light pollution, sound pollution, and all the rest. Okay, the top one is a painting my father did probably back in the 60s. In case you don't know, my father was the publisher of the paper. The paper's been in the family since 1887. And he also was a painter. He went to Parsons School of Design in New York City. And so that's a painting with the barn that David used to own. I think that barn goes back to 1820 or 1840 or something. And then the bottom one's a recent painting of mine from about 10 years ago. It shows the same area, but from that little island. There's a series of islands right in front of Sugar Run, and that was done. And one of the things that I like about painting Sugar Run is the timeless quality of it. It looks pretty much like it did maybe in 1910 or 1950, and it just has a timeless quality that I love to paint. We just went to Thomas Cole's home in the town of Catskill, New York, and this is a painting of his of the Connecticut River at Mount Holyoke. It's called the Oxbow. And part of my appeal with going to visit Thomas Cole's home in the town of Catskill was his sort of spiritual underpinnings and kind of like a proto-ecologist or a proto-environmentalist. And it's this idea of an artist combining the aesthetic with the environmental, so you don't have to be just art for art's sake. You can actually, one can actually combine their artistic endeavors with higher social purposes too. And that's what Thomas Cole did. He was the leader and the progenitor of the Hudson River School. And I have a wonderful book here. It was published by the museum there. It's called The Sanctified Landscape. And the title of the book kind of implies this idea of finding the spiritual in art. And it's very appealing to me to find art can be an avenue or an access to the spirituality. Wylusing to Warren, The Tale of Two Towns. I don't know if any of you have been to Warren. I've lived most of my life in Pennsylvania, but I never went to Warren. It's out in western Pennsylvania, almost out to Erie. And I had a show there at a museum this spring at the Czury Art Gallery. And traveling out to Route 6 across western Pennsylvania, it's a lot like going through the Adirondacks. Just a beautiful, there's not even many dairy farms there. It's just a beautiful area. And then finally you get to a Warren, and it's this huge industrialized town. It's been that way since the 1900s. It's not a fracking-related industry. It's a oil refinery. But it was, oh my God, I said, I can't believe this. Who would want to live in a town like this? But this is exactly what Wylusing is asking for. Wylusing is to have this industry on the river here, right in front of the town. And I thought, would anybody, ask that or wish that on their worst enemy, is to have a turn into an industrialized nightmare? And this photograph doesn't even really do it justice. It goes on for a good mile and a half on the Allegheny River, and it completely dominates this town. Warren's probably more like the size of Sayre or Athens, like around 15,000 people. So it's as I say, a cautionary tale here. Okay, this is a painting I did many years ago. It's about the size that it is projected there. It's rather large. It's of the Tioga Point in Athens, Pennsylvania. It's where the Susquehanna and the Chemung come together. And I have it here to show this transition point between Pennsylvania and New York. And I'm very glad for my brethren or fellow New Yorkers who have stopped fracking at the border. It would just be a travesty and another abomination beyond speaking to have the Finger Lakes or the Adirondacks inundated with this fossil fuel infrastructure. And now I paint a lot in the Finger Lakes, Seneca Lake, Cayuga Lake, these beautiful wineries and beautiful landscapes. And to have it turned into a gas colony would just be a tragedy. And I think New York looked at Pennsylvania and saw Pennsylvania that they didn't want to do that there. So I'm very pleased with that. This is a painting I did just last year in Laceyville. It's from a special rock there called Table Rock. There's a hotel right below it called the Table Rock Hotel. There's actually a photograph of that hotel in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City taken way back, like 1840 or something. But I have this here to show that these whole valleys of the Susquehanna River could easily just be filled up with these interrelated fracking industries. It seems like a far-fetched idea, but we're seeing it happen all the time, what I call the floodgate phenomenon. I guess other people call it that too. Okay, these are two words. A friend of mine just acquainted me with this top word, riparian zone. I hadn't heard of that before, but it's sort of like a close opposite of Quanaskatsi. It's this Hopi Indian term. It means out of balance, and it was a film in 1982 with a minimalist score by Philip Glass, and I saw it in Ithaca when it first came out. Okay, I've never been to Houston, but Brooke Lenker was mentioning it last week or a couple of weeks ago. He gave a talk at our gallery in Ithaca, and from what I understand, it's just like a vast petrochemical nightmare, and it's another cautionary tale. Do we want Bradford County to become another Houston-like place? Okay, the LNG is good for Wylusing as it will increase our tax revenue. I hear this all the time. It was used as a justification by the Chamber of Commerce. In addition to the township supervisors, I'm really just pleased with the Chamber of Commerce. Dave Buck and I were board members for 10 years. Dave served as the president for 2 terms, and to see the Chamber of Commerce turn in this way is just unconscionable as far as I'm concerned. The mission statement for the Chamber of Commerce used to have right at the top of it historic preservation. And somebody's taken off of the mission statement, so now they can promote the destruction of our history in Friedenshutten, and they can get behind a fracking industry, related industry. We both, all of us that were on the board, devoted a lot of time to it. I would give paintings to them over the years for their auction, so I gave thousands of dollars, and I'm not going to do that anymore. If this is, I'm not a member anymore, but I'm certainly not going to support the Chamber of Commerce if that's what they stand for today. This was a response to a letter to the editor of The Rocket that I wrote. And I wrote this long letter with a lot of facts about fracking, the dangers of fracking. Then I got this one-liner, what's the beef? They use propane and natural gas in New York. And the implication there is that we're somehow sanctimonious or hypocritical that we still use natural gas to heat our homes. But the point that they're missing is that New York is going in the other direction. They're trying to minimize the infrastructure there and go the other way, try to go towards technologies that are less intrusive. So that's the salient point there that is missing from this criticism. Okay, debacles in Wylusing. I don't know if any of you were here back in the 60s, and there's a few people that may have been here, but I was about 10 when this happened. There was this big scam that happened at the Wyalusing Rocks where they promoted this Indian powwow, and it was a big sham. There was no real Indians there, but it attracted thousands of people, and it was my first experience with a traffic jam. And I sold a lot of lemonade that day. And people were just blocked up into for miles, maybe as far back as Laceyville or Bishopin. And but years after, like I go to college, and people would say, "Oh yeah, I remember Wylusing. We got stuck in this traffic jam for that fake powwow that happened in Wylusing." So I'm thinking this could easily be the next debacle in Wylusing. Be traveling around. Oh, that's where that horrible LNG plant is in the fracking industry. Do we ever want to go to Bradford County? Okay. This is also a response to another letter that I had. It was actually by my brother. And as you may tell, we don't talk about politics at Thanksgiving dinner. So we're pretty much on the opposite side of just about everything. But this is probably what a lot of people think about New York, that it was stopped by a small group of radicals, hippies, or whatever. It's simply not true. It was stopped by a widespread public support, and it became a safety issue. And I have good friends that were part of the movement then, that They went to jail a couple of times, putting themselves on the line in Watkins Glen to prevent a fracking-related industry from putting propane under Seneca Lake. I cannot think of anything more dangerous than that. What could go wrong? Highly combustible stuff underneath of Seneca Lake. It could be another thing like the Knox mining disaster, which I'm going to get to here in a minute. And Ireland, this New Fortress Energy also has its greedy little claws into Ireland. It's called Shannon Energy in Ireland, and they're trying to open up Ireland to the fracking industry. But just last year, Ireland eliminated it for the whole country, as did England just last week. Yeah. And I mention that because when I talk to people here in Wylusing and Bradford County, there's this kind of sigh of resignation that it's inevitable. Even today, they said, why are you doing that? It's a done deal, isn't it? And I guess I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I'm aspirational that maybe it can be stopped. My best case scenario with that beautiful area could be turned into a national park or a county park or something similar. Okay, this is a painting I did of Ireland just last year. It's County Donegal. We've done the whole west coast of Ireland, and we have friends there. Some of you are friends with Barb and Jim, and it's a beautiful country. And to see this area just crawling with the fracking industry would be another travesty. So I'm very pleased that Ireland has prevented it from coming in. This is a painting of Keuka Lake at the Constantine Frank Winery, and the same applies here. This beautiful landscape, historic house, goes back to 1886. My swing band just played there for an opening this summer, and once again, to see this whole beautiful Finger Lakes crawling with fracking infrastructure would be a travesty. This is another painting of mine. In fact, it's on the cover of my book, which I have here. It's a view of Seneca Lake near Burdett, New York. Okay, so here's a pastel that I did of the Friedenshutten. It was commissioned by David Dibble. He died a number of years ago, but he was a history teacher here in Wylusing, and he supplied me with the map. And it was great to hear Katy's talk about it as we stood over the map down at the monument here. But as I understand it, this drainage ditch is going to go right through the center of town, or very close to it. So it's just another example of this disregard or disrespect for history, and how it's just these fracking companies have no qualms about going anywhere. They'll go in cemeteries, sacred ground. And I like the analogy, if this were to happen in Gettysburg or the Arlington National Cemetery in DC or other historical places, I think people would be up in arms. But this is a sacred spot to me. It's our local history, and to see the local people and not bat an eye about it is very upsetting. Okay, this is a painting I did in 1983 of Wyalusing. What I'm doing in this talk is tying in the history and the environmental. But the center of town is pretty much intact, except right down there in the lower left, there's two buildings that were taken out. And this building here is where we are right now. We're in this building. This was taken down about 1985, and it's where the original home for my family's newspaper was in 1887, and the original editor lived just up the street here. But I happened to see it when that was being torn down, and I have a list of all the historic buildings that have been torn down here from Wylusing in just the past couple of decades. Okay, what they said here at the Chamber of Commerce, I read the review or the article about it, and they're saying this is just a transitional thing. And how long is transitional? Is it going to be there for 10 years, 50 years, 100 years? And then will it ever be returned to the pastures that have been there? And then they also, in the headline, the rockets sort of become a megaphone for corporate spin by saying that it's a green energy. And an example of that are plastics. There's certainly nothing green about plastics filling up our oceans. Okay. That's what I just said here. It's not really transitional. Okay, this was a response to my blog post by somebody that lived here. Just finds it horrifying. His family, he thinks, is probably rolling over in their graves by the fact that this LNG has been allowed to come through. Okay, my father wrote this song called Susquehanna Moon, and I have the sheet music to it someplace. I didn't really do this painting as an homage to it, but it easily could be. This is a house that David owns here. It's white here, but it's since been painted yellow, and I painted this house, done paintings of this house many times. But this LNG is going to be right over there where the moon is rising here. Hi, James, welcome. Okay, this little girl, this teenage girl has been very, very inspirational to me. And she talked at the United Nations and warned everybody of the dangers of global warming, climate change. And I have this photograph in here, like I said at the beginning of my talk, because she started this alone, and now it's a global movement. And I was sort of relating to that. I thought I was going to be the only person that was down there on Route 6, so thank you for making me feel not so alone. Okay, is fracking a moral crime? This is a bumper sticker I saw in Ithaca, and it really is, and I think Greta would certainly concur. It's ruining our earth, our water, our air, and upsetting a lot of things in a very deleterious way. And then I'm equating it with other social ills here: slavery, child labor, the tobacco industry, maybe the Vietnam War could be put in there too. And we've overcome those things. Maybe we can overcome fracking as well. Okay, Sandra Steingraber, I don't know if you know her, but she's a very eloquent speaker. I've been to one of her rallies in Watkins Glen. She's one of the most passionate advocates of the environmental movement. She's a cancer survivor and a faculty at Ithaca College, and a wonderful inspiration. She was tried to be here, but she was just too busy. She couldn't make it. Okay, these are three things that I founded. I started with a lot of help from people. Dave Buck was on all these committees pretty much. The North Branch Triathlon, we started that 16 years ago. And the subtext, or the mission statement of the triathlon was to draw attention to the beauty of the Susquehanna River. And that's certainly going to be undermined now because the part of the triathlon is a canoe race, and it goes right in front of the LNG site. And I started the North Branch Arts Trail, and that's the implied part of that was the Susquehanna River and the Blue Heron Art Gallery where we are now. They're all sort of founded with the subtext of honoring our environment. Okay, I hear this a lot from people, even sort of environmentalist people. They say, it's just another extraction industry like these other ones here. And but I think the point that's missing is the fragile state of the earth now. It's not just another extraction industry. It's much more insidious. And the point that's missing is global warming, how it's interconnected with all of that. And so I disagree with that sort of minimizing of it. Okay, can we trust big energy companies? This is a list of sort of some of the main ones that have happened. And at the bottom, people that are out of the area, the fracking companies have reneged on their contract, and that has made a lot of people unhappy. But the top one, the Knox mining disaster, I was only about 5 years old when that happened, but it's an example of another voracious industry, the coal industry in northeastern Pennsylvania, where they punched a hole in the bottom of the Susquehanna River and it ended the mining industry. This is the BP disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is the Knox mining disaster near Wilkes-Barre. Okay, I need to get a drink of water. Hold on just a second.
You got it, Brian, or you want to?
I got a response to a letter to the editor that I wrote, and the guy wondered if I paid taxes in Browntown, and the implication was that I had no right to protest there because I didn't pay taxes in Browntown. And this is a list of organizations that should be protecting us, but none of them has stepped up to the plate to protect us. This thing has kind of slipped through the cracks. And I just heard from a friend, Victoria Switzer, that our state representative signed this law to effect that's allowing fracking water to be put on our roads. And there was an article in today's paper by James Lowenstein, who's here. It was a very informative article about this water treatment plant just outside of town between here and Towanda, and the extreme measures they're going to purify this water. I'm really glad that they're doing that. But the point is, if you just left the water in the river, you wouldn't have to do this. So it's just like millions of dollars are being spent to purify this water. Like I said, I'm glad they're doing it, but if the fracking industry wasn't here, you wouldn't have to do all that. Okay, I have a list here of the towns, or the houses that have all been felled, been raised here in Wylusing. It sort of fits in with my theme here of historic loss and environmental loss. And for a town the size of Wylusing, this many buildings is quite a loss. And you know, I knew all these people. I grew up with that's been in most of these houses here. Okay, thank you. This is a hotel that was here in town. It was torn down in 1986. It was a beautiful hotel, and unfortunately, it was razed, and it was a kind of a slow, tragic demise. A family that was in it, they were running drugs, and then they all got put in jail, and then the church next to it purchased it, and then it was destroyed. But I was told by people that were in there that it was only a quarter of an inch out of plumb. It was a remarkable architectural testament. I was also told that at the top, the second cupola on the left there was designed for a clock, but it was never put in. Okay, I have this bridge in here, and my father, Brian Keeler, who's mayor of the town, and back in the 60s there was this phenomenon called sit-ins, be-ins, and there was a TV show called Laugh-In. But my father had the first and only sit-in in Wylusing back around 1969. There was a bridge right down the street here, and it had this wonderful wooden plank floor on it, and my family house was right above it, and it had a very distinctive sound whenever a car or a truck went across it. This is a railroad bridge in the town of Catskill, New York. We visited this when I was there at the Thomas Cole Museum, and this is what my father wanted to do. He wanted to make it into a pedestrian walkway, but he received scathing criticism of the idea. People just thought it was an eyesore. But they've done this in Catskill and made it into a beautiful community thing, a walking bridge. And they did the same thing in Binghamton, New York, too. There's a bridge there, and it's a pedestrian bridge that shows you know, vision and foresight of taking historical things and making them an essential part of the community. This is a painting I did. It's in a private collection in Montrose now. And this is where the bridge was. It was right in front of the building here. And this building was torn down just last year. I had a campaign to try to save it, but it didn't happen. But it was a great old building. It had been there since 1896. And the creek always flooded, but the water just would flow in and flow out, and the building just stayed there. It was the home of a horseshoe-related industry at the time, and unfortunately the automobile was invented. It was the end of the horseshoeing, but it was on the verge of becoming an international company. This is a painting, a self-portrait that I did about 25 years ago. It shows my family home here. It was built by my ancestors in 1860. And I have it here just as another example. Now, this could easily be bowled over by the next owner. There's been, like I said, there's been 25 homes torn down in Wyalusing in the past 30 years or so. Some fracking company could come in, they could build a dandy mini mart there. It just shows the fragility and the temporary nature of our historic architecture and land. It's a painting my father did. He chose his family there at the same house in 1949. So I kind of did my painting as an homage to my father's painting. Okay, this is my overt political statement here. It's called The Allegory of the Slippery Slope. It's based on my reinterpretation of the famous painting by Peter Bruegel, 1568. We just saw the original a few years ago. It's in Naples, and I think there's another version of it in the Louvre. And I asked my bandmates to pose. I told them what I was doing, but the guy says, I didn't want to be there with a Confederate flag in my hand. He didn't tell me you're going to do that. But it has an effigy of Trump over there with the KKK. He's just an unconscionable president. I mean, I could go on and on for an hour about him, but the point for this lecture is to show his environmental record, which is just atrocious. Almost daily there's some environmental protection that is being revoked. Okay, this last thing after that one, I'm just going to leave you this as a vision of hope. I did this painting about 25 or 30 years ago. It's also done from that island right in front of the LNG plant. Beautiful summer evening on the Susquehanna. And I hope it stays that way. And that's my vision for Bradford County, and sort of my homage to the beauty of the land. So that's it. Thank you so much. All right, somebody turn up the
Well, not yet. Just give me. I'll give you the cue then.
Okay.
I want to be able to see everybody. No, but I want to thank Brian for his talk, and you'll hear some of his themes and points sort of reinforced in my presentation. But I want to say that Brian's a hard act to follow because his art is so amazing, as I'm sure you would concur. But I just want to, I guess, start by sort of introducing myself a little bit more. So, as was alluded to, in addition to directing the Frac Tracker Alliance, which is really what I'm going to focus on tonight in my talk, is our work as it relates to fracking defined in a very broad way, and of course the LNG facility and some of the interconnections. But I want to also certainly mention that in a prior life, I worked for the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and also the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and in those capacities, I really developed a relationship with the Susquehanna River, and through a variety of activities, one of which, and very importantly, was the Susquehanna Sojourn event that David mentioned. And it was because of the Sojourn I got to meet characters like Rich Fitzsimmons and David Buck and some other folks who both of them, as well as a lot of other folks, had a real impact on my life. I mean, in various ways. So, and it's what inspired me to write a novel that's set on the Susquehanna River, including this area, and it's also how I got to indirectly know Brian Keeler, because in 2004, Brian's art was used for the Sojourn and for the River of the Year poster, the Susquehanna River of the Year that year, and so Brian's beautiful painting Moon Miss Susquehanna adorns the cover of the book, The Restorers, and yes, you can tell I'm a new novelist because I'm not good at self-promotion. So I didn't even bring like copies of this tonight, except for two. But if you're interested in reading it, it is available through Amazon. It's The Restorers by Brook Lenker. So check it out. But and I would love to do readings and that kind of thing, but I really want to focus on the important and serious and somber topic before us tonight. So first, let me start. This is our mission statement at Frac Tracker. We do work. We're founded in Pennsylvania. We do a lot of work in Pennsylvania, but we actually work across the country, looking and a little bit internationally, looking at this sort of the nightmare that is the extraction industry for oil and gas, and we do that largely through mapping and analysis and a lot of data work, and we work with a lot of other organizations to support their work. And that work's how I got to meet Vera Scroggins too. So it's had its benefits, but day to day it's a pretty depressing topic, as you can imagine. So this headline from January is pretty shocking, right? It seems like that's insane. Like that is insane. So, but unfortunately, it shows the extent, the depths to which, literally and figuratively, to what this industry will do. And so this may be insane, but it's already been attempted. And it happened right here in the United States, in New Mexico in 1967, in Carson National Forest, where a company was allowed to, and this is, I know you can't see it very well, but it's a historic marker at that site. They detonated nuclear devices 4,000 feet down. The results were disappointing, except that one reason was the gas came up highly radioactive and couldn't be used, and it contaminated the site. So the site was off limits for years, but now I guess you can go there and see this marker to human stupidity. Okay, so yes, nuclear fracking is a thing. But in terms of just sort of grounding us for this evening, I wanted to talk about Pennsylvania fracking and this time lapse. It doesn't go right up to current day, but it gives you a good idea of what's happened in Pennsylvania with unconventional extraction. Yeah, Dave, you can turn the light off now if you want. Yeah. I think I can find the buttons on my computer. But so since the 2004-5. This is what's been happening with unconventional or wells, what we usually call unconventional wells or fracked wells in Pennsylvania. So it's been a true sort of cancer spreading across our landscape over the Marcellus Formation and to some extent the Utica Formation. So you get the idea. But I wanted to bring us even closer tonight to Wyalusing and show what's happening in sort of this greater area. And see, Wyalusing is kind of dead center in the map. And I know you can't see this very well either, but you get the idea. All those dots largely represent wells. So there's some DEP now has some new ways they're classifying some of the well status. But just a quick glance here, you should know that those are wells. With the exception of the green dots, those are compressor stations. And so the point, of course, that I want to make is just how widespread, how ubiquitous extraction is in this part of the state. And Bradford County is one of the most heavily drilled counties in Pennsylvania for dry gas. So, but then this map, basically the same map, is showing violations of this industry. So, and if we could, and these maps are interactive, so if you click on these yellow dots, you'll see the actual pop-ups of what these violations were. So these are DEP issues, notices of violation, and some of them are very egregious, some are more minor, but they're all pretty serious. And just to give you a sense of how widespread violations are in this industry in Pennsylvania, we're now at over 12,000 unconventional wells in Pennsylvania in just over a dozen years or whatever. We're over 12,000 wells, and we've had over 13,000 violations. So the premise that you learn from your mistakes and you correct them doesn't really hold up, nor does 3 strikes and you're out or something. because the same companies are doing the same things over and over again. And it's just business as usual. So of course, as we know, I think, there's all kinds of problems associated with fracking. And we could talk for hours about just these impacts, these negative impacts. But I'm just going to have to really broad brush a few of them. But air pollution is certainly a huge issue, and that takes on various forms. But these slides are a series that were all. These are actually all from West Virginia, but it's the same situation here. So these images show basically these are all different phases of well pad development and the drilling of a well and the fracking of a well. But what you can see are these visible pollution, air pollution, coming from these sites at every phase of well pad development, from the cutting and burning of trees to the fracking itself, to when they're putting sand down the borehole, etc. There's emissions and dust, and it's not healthy to live near that. Whether it's the particulate matter or the benzene or whatever you're exposed to, it makes people sick. And so that's hell if you live near that, and especially if you're putting, it's not just one well, but that activity is going to go on for months and months as you put in multiple wells. And in fact, somebody has sent me a slide the other day in Washington County, Pennsylvania, of a mega well pad that has 50 wells on it. So if you're near that activity is probably going on for years as they develop that. So that's a serious problem, let alone what we can't see, the invisible pollution that's near this. So a variety of toxins, and think about the carbon impacts, the climate impacts, whether that's carbon emissions or methane, raw methane getting into the atmosphere, because raw methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. So I'd like to show this image too. So I took this picture from, and I'm not making this up, Panorama Park in Bakersfield, California, looking out over the 10,000 oil wells in the Kern River oil field. And I can tell you, standing there, you can smell the pollution, you can taste it in the back of your throat, you start to get a dull headache, and obviously you can see the pollution. So, too, imagine living near this. Imagine, all the health problems that come with this situation. So again, it's not just what you can see that can harm you, it's what you can't see. Compressor stations are large emitters of pollution. And sometimes it looks like everything's fine, right? But if you look at it with forward-looking infrared technology, that's the same place, that's the same moment. That's looking through it through a FLIR camera. And those are VOCs, that's methane, that's potentially it's methane, but it's other volatile organics too, coming off that site. They're also, they're problematic too because they're all over the place, so they're emitting pollution that makes people sick, but they're also they also have big climate impacts. So anyway, and these images were taken, this isn't, the industry likes to say, oh, that's heat. That's not heat. The people that do this thermography with earthworks, they go to the same classes that the industry people go to get certified to operate these cameras and interpret the data. So water. We all, there's probably been more attention to some extent about water contamination issues, and the industry likes to, kind of try to cast doubt on that there's really any problem. Well, one piece of work that we did with Public Herald, the investigative news outfit, Public Herald does amazing work, and they spend all this time, they and their volunteers in DEP regional offices pulling together all this data, and they found that since the mid-2000, like 2005, I'll just say, don't quote me on that, but somewhere around that time frame, since then onward, there have been almost 9,500 complaints to the DEP, and that figure is probably 2 years old, where homeowners generally had complained to DEP, a formal complaint, saying that when drilling came near me, something happened to my water, or something happened to my property, or something happened to my livestock, or goes on and on. About half of these complaints are water related. So thousands of complaints from people living across our state because something's going on with their water. And we all know that if something happens to our water, our property values just vanish. Not to mention having the massive inconvenience of not being able to use your water, and so on. And so obviously that's really serious. DEP itself has issued last count I saw was over 350 determination letters, positive determination letters, where they said to a homeowner, yes, we are assigning blame to your situation to the company. They are going to have to make it right. So that's 350 people that have had their cases verified, so to speak, by DEP. And that's a lot of people. But we know that the number is so much larger, and we know that people all around have water buffaloes or water treatment systems put in to try to remove contaminants. So there are widespread problems with water, groundwater, let alone some surface water impacts. So just to, I guess, put some context to this, there's an organization called Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy. They're all academics that work there, and they put together a paper a couple years ago where they combed through all the studies that have been done, all the academic studies looking at public health, looking at water contamination, and looking at air issues around fracking. And what they found was that you can see the percentages, so 84% for public health, 69% for water quality, 87% of those studies said had that correlation with negative impacts, if that makes sense. So that's the preponderance of the studies have shown serious problems, right? Problems with this industry and these issues. Pipelines, I just want to address this quickly, that pipelines come with their own set of issues. And of course, with all this drilling, there's been a lot of pipeline construction. And so just as an example, Mariner East pipeline across the southern third of Pennsylvania had over 100 incidents of spills or what do you call it? Basically, I can't think of the term.
Breach.
No, it's really funny. It's like
Inadvertent returns.
yes, thank you. Inadvertent returns, but basically they're contamination incidents. Thankfully, most of the time it's drilling muds, which aren't that toxic, but they still have caused serious problems, and they've also caused a lot of sinkholes. So just that construction phase, let alone being destructive to the landscape, it's also causing a lot of problems, not to mention all the eminent domain injustice that's happening with that project and many others. So this is just a chart. You can't see it in real life in detail, but it has the numbers of spills or inadvertent returns by county for the route of the Mariner East pipeline. And then pipelines also have big accidents, explosions, fires, that kind of thing. And the federal federal agency, PIMSA, I'm not going to recite the full name right now, tracks that, and we've been able to pull their data and map it. So it's been since, if you go back to like 2010, there's been thousands of serious incidents on pipelines across the United States. So they happen I think it was like 1.6 or 1.8 accidents a day on the pipeline network. And of course, it's not just the bigger transmission lines, it's the gathering lines coming out of every well pad. And when you look at a place like Bradford County, this image is a couple years old, based on county data on the gathering lines, you can see the fragmentation of the landscape that happens. Now I realize not all that's forested, some of that's fields and farmland, but still, there's a lot of fragmentation issues, habitat disruption, but there's also, that's also a hell of a big network where leaks can occur, problems can happen. And with this development, whether it's pipelines or well pads, does. A lot of it happens on public lands, on forest lands that we all enjoy and care about. And it's a major industrial development in a place that it shouldn't happen. It's not an industrial zone, it's a state forest. So this is a well pad on Wylusing State Forest. And then if you look at the fragmentation that happens, you can see it in images like this. You can see water impoundments, well pads, road network, where they weren't before. And we know that things like interior nesting songbirds are very vulnerable when habitat fragmentation starts to happen. Invasive species come in, all kinds of things. So we don't want to see this happen to our state forests, let alone recreational conflicts. You know, if I'm out backpacking, you know, enjoying the solitude, do I want to hear, you know, a fracking operation or truck traffic? No. So we looked at this issue too across the state, projecting outward. So there was an industry study, some industry data that had a number, I think it was like 47,000 wells by 2050 or something like that. So we took that number and tried to say, okay, what does that mean in terms of impact, that some tangible sort of impacts on natural resources that we could quantify. So what we found is that, well, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. I want to talk about water first. I'll come to that slide soon. It looks very similar. But I want to talk about water use. This industry is very thirsty, right? Uses a lot of water. In 2017, it was using about 11.4 million gallons of water per well to hydraulically fracture. So that's 17 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water for one well. And you've already seen some of the numbers on wells. So with all that water use comes a lot of waste. This industry produces an enormous amount of waste. So this was for 2017, the red line showing unconventional waste from unconventional wells. And it's out here surpassing 50 million barrels. A barrel is 42 gallons. So you can do the math, 50 million times 42. So you're talking about billions of gallons of wastewater. And wastewater is a generous term because it's toxic waste. So it's 50 billion, or it's, you know, billions of gallons of toxic waste that has to be moved across the landscape and disposed of. Now some of it gets recycled, some of it goes back into wells, but a lot of that has to be disposed of. And so where does it go? Well, it goes to different states, it goes to different places. Where we don't see a lot of injection wells for waste in Pennsylvania, but we're starting to see more proposals for them because it's closer, it cuts down costs for the industry. But we do know that a lot of waste goes to Ohio, to injection wells in that state. I visited this injection well, and in the last 6 years, that well had taken in, this one disposal well had taken in 89 million gallons of waste. So, you know, what's going to happen to that? Who's watching over that well, of that waste storage site? What about leaks? What about when that infrastructure ages? And of course, we know that these injection wells, in particular, but also fracking in some cases, but especially the injection wells, have been linked to earthquakes, or what we call induced seismicity. And that's not hyperbole, that's not conjecture. The USGS academic studies have said yes, absolutely. Under certain circumstances, it's lubricating old fault lines and you have movement. So the worst place for this, I mean, there's been earthquakes in eastern Ohio, but the worst place for it is definitely Oklahoma, where they went from 2 earthquakes a year on average to 2 earthquakes a day. And so this is an infographic. It's pretty busy. I know it's a little hard to follow, but you can see that they had 7,500 magnitude 2.5 or greater earthquakes since 2011. And it also mentions the waste number in here, which is just staggering. The EPA estimated more than 2 billion gallons of wastewater have been are injected in the ground in the United States every day. But some of these wells, we looked at these wells in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas, and the volumes they were accepting were just enormous. I mean, some wells had taken in more than 1 billion gallons. So it's a huge issue, and it's unfortunate. Just like the way this industry is causing the disruption of America's dairy land, especially in Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, but especially west central Wisconsin, where you're seeing a proliferation of sand mining for frac sand, because every well uses a gross amount of sand to hold open all the cracks in the shale as part of that fracturing process. They call it proppants because it's propping open the cracks. So, and they like this sand the best because it's real high silica content, it's really hard, nice round spherical grains, and so they're taking farms and they're often leasing them, like we lease land here for fracking, they're leasing it for sand mines. But you're taking some of the world's most productive soils too, and you're disrupting all that soil carbon, and also it's a fragmented forest landscape out there. It's a patchwork, and you're cutting into that remaining forest in some cases. So but it's not just about the ecological impacts or agricultural impacts. It's also about living next to a mine where there's silica dust, because it causes silicosis and it's an inhalation hazard. So, and it's getting moved around the landscape too, on rail, by truck, etc. So this was the slide I got ahead of myself onto. So we looked at that build out, right, into the future, and we found that the industry would use 580 billion gallons of fresh water. 130 billion gallons of liquid waste would be produced. To put that into context, I like to try to wrap it into numbers people can get their minds around. That amount of waste is the flow of the Allegheny River past Pittsburgh for 10 continuous days. The entire river. Like, that's like a river of waste for 10 days. That's how much waste this industry is producing. And 323 million truck trips. But the other number I want to point to is the acres of land that are being disturbed by the industry or deforested, etc. So we calculated that number out. So 800,000 acres. That's the equivalent area of those 4 Pennsylvania counties. So that's the equivalent disturbance area that this industry is having when you add up the pipelines, the well pads, the new road development, etc. So bringing it back to here, okay? This LNG proposal wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all that other activity. But now we're facing this. What does this mean? So we don't have a ton of information yet, or I haven't assembled a lot yet. But I can tell you, my colleague Karen Edelstein put this map together. It shows a possible rail line, or rail route, actually, to get the product to the Delaware River for export. It also shows locations of coal plants. Some of those coal plants could be converted to natural gas power plants. And the industry likes to say that clean burning natural gas. Well, yes, it is cleaner burning, just from a standpoint of its CO2 emissions when the gas is burned. But they're leaving out the part of the equation about all that fugitive methane that comes with this process that escapes into the atmosphere, thus making the the greenhouse gas footprint of fracked gas as bad as coal. So we don't want to convert plants to natural gas, because it's going to perpetuate climate change. So anyway, but we put those on there, and we also put petrochemical facilities on there, proposed and then also existing petroleum terminals, etc. So it shows this web, right, of places that could benefit from or otherwise connect into this sort of nefarious network stemming from this LNG facility. So related to this, although it's slightly different, is basically the premise that, look, whether it's dry gas being liquefied, it's all destined largely for export. because it's not about American energy independence, it's about making money. When the gas prices are super low, the way this industry makes money is the plan is to export it. Because Europe and other countries elsewhere, in Asia, etc., use natural gas too, just like we do. So, at least for the foreseeable future. So they're trying to liquefy it and export it. But this graphic, it's not about that, but it could be the same graphic almost. It's showing natural gas liquids from southwestern Pennsylvania going to Europe, ultimately to make plastics. So the wet gas in particular is great for making plastic, but dry gas can be used for other petrochemicals and fertilizers, etc. But yeah, there's whether it's going to an LNG point in Ireland, which hopefully now has been stopped, or to an INEOS facility to make plastics in Europe. It's all, that's the plan. Ship it off, right? So it's energy dominance, and it's ultimately about trying to make money. But, well, actually, before my butt, sorry. I'll get to my butt. Brian mentioned that I'd been in Houston about a year and a half ago, and we toured what I would call petrochemical hell. So for miles along the coast, all you see is this, just this dystopian scene of pollution and infrastructure, stacks, big balls of LNG, just, it goes on and on for miles. And it's not, so we probably know, everybody kind of knows that Houston has a lot of that stuff, right? And if you have to live near it, and there are communities that are just surrounded by that stuff. And yes, and people are sick. And that's why it's called Cancer Alley, because people get cancer. So if that's not sort of bad enough, this industry has very devious plans for getting the world completely hooked on single-use plastics. And there's something like, this isn't the exact number, but it's ballpark, something like 350 petrochemical facilities being planned in the United States right now. And even along the Gulf Coast, well, we know about the big cracker plant in Pittsburgh, outside Pittsburgh, but there's also other crackers planned out there. Recently, Exxon now is talking about a cracker outside Pittsburgh somewhere. Exact location to be determined. And so a cracker is cracking ethane. So ethane is a natural gas liquid. It comes out of the ground with the methane. There's methane, there's ethane, there's pentane, butane, propane, right? So you get the idea. So, but ethane in particular, which is pretty prevalent in the wet gas stream from southwest Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, is perfect for making into polyethylene. So they make these big plants called crackers, because they crack the ethane molecule and they make long molecules out of it. Is sort of what is the basic situation. And so they have all this, and it's kind of like a byproduct, right? They're trying to get the methane out. That's the main fuel. That's what we think of as natural gas. So the other stuff is the byproduct. But there's so much byproduct, let's make plastic with it. So they're planning all these giant facilities. I mean, the Shell cracker outside Pittsburgh in Monaca, PA, it will be one of the largest in North America. But there's even a bigger one, I think, planned on the Gulf Coast of Texas, called Exxon Sabic facility, but that's just one. There's others too. So so if you look at the build out of petrochem in the Ohio Valley and in the Permian Basin and the Gulf Coast of Texas, you're talking about two huge carbon bombs that, if they get tapped, could just put getting climate change under control out of reach. So we've got to keep these products in the ground. We've got to prevent them from making all this plastic. Just the plastic life cycle, there's a big carbon emitter. This is a couple images. I'm almost finished here, but these are a couple images of the Shell plant under construction. Some of the largest cranes in the world are there. And we watched this go up over the last couple of years. But in sort of wrapping up, I'm not quite done, but I like to show this image because it was similar to one of Brian's slides that mentions when is enough enough? And this slide shows the current build out of drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. So the thousands of rigs, the thousands of wells, the thousands of lease tracts of seafloor for extraction, and the 25,000 plus miles of pipeline connecting it all. And again, it sort of makes you say, you know, drill baby drill. Well, you know, we're sacred. You know, when is enough enough? So it is a moral issue. My friend Juan Pablo Olson had an audience with the Pope, and of course we know about the encyclic that the Catholic Church issued. Talks about creation and protecting Mother Earth. Well, so it is a moral issue. But if you don't want to think about it in moral terms, well then you might want to think about it in economic terms, because the placing your bets on this industry is a fool's errand, completely. These are just a few headlines from the last couple of months, just a few. So private investment in this industry is drying up. The companies are going bankrupt. Get your money out of fracking. So I just looked at the data. New report came out 2019 by 90,000 clean energy jobs in Pennsylvania. That number just a couple years ago was like 60 or 70,000. So it's going up all the time. And we did a map a couple years ago for a group called E2 that looks at these issues and mapped the clean energy jobs in Pennsylvania and the generating capacity too. And that's growing all the time. So it's really exciting. So it's a real thing. It's not transitional or aspirational. It's happening now, and we can accelerate it if we just start that policy alignment and put our minds to it. And we have to because of this. Because carbon is our atmosphere is getting out of control because of all the carbon or other greenhouse gases. And that's evidenced certainly just in those crazy rain events that we're having more and more frequently. So as far as I'm concerned, the future is now. And that's in Somerset, Tesla charging stations. That's Western PA, a wind turbine. I think it's this has almost a spiritual quality to it. And then, of course, as Bill McKibben says, solar is becoming cheaper every day. So let's do it. I'm sorry, I probably took too much time.
Heard me talk already over at the site and also on the road. My name is Katy Faull. I am a professor of German and humanities at Bucknell University. I've spent the whole of my academic career working on the Moravian Church. As you can tell, I'm not from these shores, and I became interested in the Moravians because they have lived everywhere I have lived. I'm not Moravian, I'm from England, in case you didn't guess. But I became very interested in this place on the Susquehanna because of Dave Buck. One day he sort of said, "Hey, what do you know about Friedenshutten?" And I said, "I'll find out." And so I went to look in the archives to see if I could find information about the site that is just below Plant. Oh, here we go. Excuse me. It's not going to. There we go. All right. I'm sorry that that's not very bright.
You want the lights out?
That might help if you don't mind, as long as you don't fall asleep. I might fall asleep. Okay, so one of the things I found was this gorgeous map that was hand-drawn by Golkowski, who was the surveyor for the Moravian Church in 1768. I'm going to come back to this map, so don't worry. And you may have noticed at the beginning, I also put a link on the first page, so if you wanted to, you can follow along, or just write that link down. That means you can see the presentation anytime you want to. So this is a very detailed survey of the area that we were just standing at. You can see where we are, where it says Wyalusing Creek in the top left-hand corner. That's where we are right now. Okay, so some people have been asking me who are the Moravians. The Moravians are a Protestant sect. They call themselves the oldest Protestant church because they predate Luther and Zwingli. And this chap with the sunbeam striking his heart is Count Ludwig von Zinzendorf, who was the founder of the Moravian Church. And one of the things that was most important at Zinzendorf in the 18th century was spreading the gospel. So he turned his church into this very much a mission church, spread all over the world, from West Africa to the West Indies, Germany, obviously into Scandinavia, Russia, even in Tibet, and then also North America. Not all at the same time, I hasten to add. There's a few facts about him. His dates. He's an aristocrat, and he had this sort of very aristocratic concept that he could change the spiritual life of the world, and he felt that he was called to do that. I won't go into too much history. So in 1742, Zinzendorf came to Pennsylvania. He had sent Anna Nitschmann, who was a missionary, out before him to meet with different groups. And this map shows you the different missions. That blob in the middle there is actually Bethlehem. We're way up there, obviously. But it shows the paths and it shows the different missions in Pennsylvania in the 18th century. And it's very useful, this map is very useful to try and work out also distances that people were traveling within a particular day. You can see on the right-hand side there's New York City, that's Staten Island. What's interesting is Manhattan wasn't interesting to them, but Staten Island was. The Hudson River, then I will come back talking about the Moravian missions on the Hudson River because they relate directly to the mission here. Then I'm from the top left-hand corner, Shamokin, right? That was one of the first missions to the Iroquois, but it was actually a blacksmith shop. So this is a very sort of brief background. One of the other things I wanted to tell you is that I had printed out a chronicle of events at Friedenshutten Mission, which were lying around. If you're interested, I can also send that to Brian Keeler if you wanted to print out more copies of that as well. Okay, so what is Friedenshutten? Friedenshutten, the people who lived in that field where the monument is, were Native Americans who came from upstate New York. So they had come from Patchgatchcock, which you see there, which is actually Connecticut, and then further up the Hudson Valley. They were Mohicans who had been in the Moravian mission up in what's called Shacomico, near present-day Rhinebeck, and also Delaware Indians or Lenni Lenape, who had been displaced from the lands, the Lenape lands, between where Bethlehem is and the so-called Blue Mountains or Wind Gap. Those lands were taken or traded by the Lenape as part of the infamous Walking Purchase. And it was actually that moment that caused the Iroquois to tell the Lenape or the Delaware Indians they could no longer make their own decisions about land. Every decision had to come through the Iroquois. Well, that's exactly what happened when the Mincy chief, Papanhook, who lived here down on where the Chilaway Street is, I think it's called, down by the Moravian Monument. Papanhook was a Mincy. He heard about the plight of Moravian Indians, and he asked the Six Nations, the Iroquois, for permission to be able to bring those Native Americans here to Friedenshutten. Now, why were these poor people being pushed all over the place? Well, they've been displaced from their ancestral lands. by political and also, political reasons in New York, and also by colonial expansion. That's especially the Mohican. The Delaware had been pushed out of the area around Bethlehem because of the growing racial tension and racial hatred that was being fomented in the state of Pennsylvania after the end of the French and Indian War. So once the French and Indian War was over, then the people, the militia, Irish Scots militia, like the Paxton Boys, decided that the only, quote Mark Twain, the only good Indian is a dead Indian, and were basically out to kill any Native Americans they could find. So in 1763, that's exactly what they tried to do. The Paxton Militia, a group of Scots-Irish men downriver and from near Harrisburg today, Paxton Township, decided that they were going to kill the Moravian Indians because they considered them to be spies, or just because they were native people. However, the Moravians had taken the Moravian Indians out of danger and put them close to Bethlehem in a village called Nain. And the Paxton Boys were so angry at not being able to kill these Indians, they killed any Indian they could find. And you may have heard of the Paxton Boys massacre, which happened in Lancaster. So that was supposedly the end of the Conestoga or the Susquehannock Indians. However, the Susquehannock had already been absorbed into the Six Nations, the Iroquois. So some Susquehannocks did survive that particular massacre. So the situation for native peoples, Christianized or not, in the middle of the 18th century, moving it towards getting closer and closer to the American Revolution, was very precarious. It was not a good idea to have native peoples living close to white communities, living close to European settler communities. There was going to be a problem, which is why Papenhoek then said, I will ask the Six Nations to bring this group of Indians here to Friedenshutten or Wyalusing. Now, right next to, as you go down Moravian Street, if you just go straight down Moravian Street here, or Moravian Road, at the end of that is the site of Wyalusing, which is a Delaware village that had been here for thousands of years. Archaeological digs have found artifacts, prehistoric artifacts at that site. And so the Papenhoek said, okay, this is a good place. We have a village here of about 90 people or more. We have 40 longhouses here. This is a safe place to bring these Indians, and they should come and live close to us. So as it says here on the slide, in 1765, David Zeisberger, who was a very famous missionary to the Native Americans, walked from Philadelphia through Bethlehem, up through the Endless Mountains, to this field on the banks of the Susquehanna. And here's David Zeisberger. A couple of years ago, a Czech film crew came here they were making a documentary about David Zeisberger, and they came up to that field and filmed at night next to the monument, and they were thrilled to actually be following in David Zeisberger's footsteps. Those are the years of operation, kind of Friedenshutten. Now, the Moravian missions were populated primarily by Native Americans. Here in Friedenshutten, there were living probably around 120 adults, mainly Lenape and Mohican. They're two very different language groups, and there's sort of very interesting records in the diary about them vying with each other for what language they were going to speak at meetings. Was it going to be in Lenape, or was it going to be in Mohican? What's really interesting, the way we can find this out in the chronicle that I made for this event, is that a very detailed diary was kept. So every day in the mission, the German missionary would write down what happened, who came, who went, who got sick, who died, which cows need to be fed, which crops need to be harvested, decisions that needed to be made, how many wax candles do we need for the children at Christmas to hold in the Christmas service? Yes, the children. There were children here, about 60 of them, who in Christmas service would hold the wax candles, and they were all Native American children, okay? And you can find out other details. If you read that chronicle, you can see that from the very early time, 1765, where there was nothing here, just the field, and no food when they arrived in the summer, and they had to eat wild potatoes, you get the sense of how the community was built, how quickly the log houses were built, how quickly the bark huts were built, how quickly the main gathering place in the center of the town, which is where the monument now stands, was also built. And it's all recorded in this diary, which is written in German script. And I'm sure every one of you can read it, right? Yeah. So that's why these things don't get published, is because even Germans can't read this script. And so this is why it takes a long time to do this, although now one of the projects I'm involved in is using artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to OCR, to read this script and produce a digital version, which makes life much easier. So that is obviously a huge help. I already talked about this. This gives you a catalogue of some of the Moravians loved to keep lists. They kept lists of who lived here. They kept lists of what crops were being grown in each person's kitchen garden. And those are the kinds of details that are in the chronicle that I passed around here. So in 1768, a few years after the initial founding of the village, Johannes Edwin, who was one of the another famous missionary of the Moravians, sat down and made this sketch of the village. And you can see that this is the precursor to that more beautiful map that I showed you in the beginning. They wanted to see what kinds of crops, what kind of flora and fauna were around this place. They also saw it as a model village. And if you've driven past the historical marker on Route 6, you will see that that is cited, that Friedenshutten was seen as some kind of model village. If you're interested in the history of American utopias, you'll recognize that this is a planned community. It was definitely a utopian community, and it was, for the most part, also self-sustaining as well. The food that was grown, the food that was needed was grown around the community. The men went on hunting trips that could go as far afield as the west branch of the Susquehanna, so they just go along, cross the river at Sugar Run, and continue along that path that would take you to the west branch, and that's the path I'm going to take when I leave here tonight to drive back to Lewisburg. So what did the settlement look like? This is a detail, obviously, of Edwin's map. Here you can see the settlement. So I don't have a pointer, so I'm going to have to use my finger. All right, this square here is the Gottesacker. That is the cemetery, okay? It's important, bear this in mind. This is where the monument stands today. This is the hall, the Saal. And then you'll notice that these squares are in different colors. Now, Brian showed us his beautiful rendering of the village an hour or so ago. And if you look carefully, you could see that there were log huts and there were also bark huts. And so what was very interesting about the Moravians is that they said to the native people, you can choose how you want to live. If you're more comfortable living in a bark hut, because that's what you're used to, then that's what you will build. If you're more comfortable living in a log house, then that's what you're going to build. And so that's what you see here, all right? And then underneath, if you can read German, it says, jedes Lot hat 32 und zwischen zwei Lots ist allemal einen großen Zehn. So in other words, this was very carefully planned out. You understood everything. Each lot is 32 feet long, and between two lots there's another 10 feet. So everything was spaced, truly like a planned community. And each of those houses had its own garden. So who lived here? This is a list of the missionaries who lived here. I'm particularly interested in women missionaries. Nobody has written very much about women missionaries. and the kind of network of knowledge that they had in Pennsylvania in the 18th century. I'm very interested in one in particular who lived here. Her name was Margarita Junkman, and she spoke fluent Mohican and fluent Lenape. And because she could speak those languages, she was German, because she could speak those languages, she was able to communicate with the women. And her input on women's lives, on women's health, on women's matters, was very, very important within this community. And that's a whole other topic. I've published some essays about that. If you're interested, I can tell you. However, more importantly, I think, are the names of the native people who lived here and what their nations were. And here you have written down the name of every single Native American who lived here, which nation they're from. Mostly, you will have their Indian name. So if you look here, you can see the Indian name, and then they will also give the baptized name. One of the projects that I have done, a digital project, is to digitize the catalog of all of the native peoples in the 18th century baptized by the Moravians, and create a network analysis of which nation they were in, their relatives, who their relatives married, etc., over time, okay? And it gives you really interesting insight into the effect of the native nation on the spread of Moravianism. Anyway, that's another project we should have time about. So this is just a list of all of the native people. Here's that map again. Here you have it from the more detailed map. It's very beautiful. You can see the garden lots now have been inked in. And then over there on the left, you have a list of the names of the people who lived in those houses. What's very interesting here is that you have a widow's house. I can see which one it is. So a house which is just for the widows. This shows you that even within the this mission village, the Moravian custom of ordering people by choirs, which meant that they're grouped by age, gender, and marital status, that even within this tiny community, that structure was still maintained, which is kind of wild. Right. In 1772, the decision was made to leave this place. So the mission didn't last long here, the village didn't last long. The reason for that was land disputes between Sir William Johnson up in upstate New York and the Iroquois, and pressures, political pressures also with the Connecticut settlers in the Wyoming Valley. So there was this pressure to take land, right? It was a land grab, pretty similar to what we've just been hearing about with the fracking industry. And it was decided that the safest place for the Indian village to go was Ohio. And so this is the name of the people who moved everything from the Moravian town to Ohio. The way they did it was in two routes. One was downriver, one was across the land. The one across the land is the path I will take tonight. The one that goes downriver is a lovely kayak sojourn, which Dave organized a few years ago when we did the Moravian sojourn. We followed their river path. And they left, they went to Ohio, they took with them everything that they could. They sold also all of the things they couldn't take with them in Sunbury or Shamokin, which is close to where I'm from. And as they left this place, they took the bell with them, which Amos, you may have seen that name, Amos, put in the front of the first canoe and tolled down the river as they left Friedenshutten. I just think of that as something like 60 canoes going down river. And the first canoe has this beautiful cast bell in the front that is tolling as you're going down river. It's a very powerful image, I think. Yeah. So they left this place, they left the houses that they built, and they were fine houses with glass windows and with iron fixtures, with tile ovens to keep warm. The Zaal had in it originally a spinet, which was built here. Think about that, must be one of the earliest musical instruments built in this country was built here in Friedenshutten by native people, a spinet. They also had 2 oil paintings by Valentine Height, who is a famous Moravian painter, portrait painter, of the biblical scenes. They hung in the Saal, and they had stained glass windows. Anyway, so they left the buildings here without basically just the structure. They took everything they could sell with them to Job Chillaway. Job Chillaway, whose name is on that road down off Moravian Rd, saying, take care of this, here you go, you know, use it the way you want to. Just 7 years later, Sullivan's army came through here, and Sullivan's army reported that as they came to Friedenshutten, there was nothing left. Nothing. The houses had gone, the huts had gone, there was nothing in the field. And they came thinking they would find something, because they'd heard of Friedenshutten, but there was nothing left. It could have been floods. They had several floods. Anyway, one of the issues I want you to think about, so the mission itself is ephemeral, right? The buildings had disappeared pretty quickly. Everything of value was taken from this place, except the people who died here, right? And this is a list of the people who died here in Friedenshutten. The first 2, Eva, who I think was about 17, and these are native people, and Peter, were buried in a lowland. They hadn't yet consecrated the cemetery. They were buried in the lowland close to the river. Then, in 1768, they built the Gottesacker, or the cemetery, which is where, on Easter morning, all Moravians hold their Easter morning services. So that the Gottesacker cemetery isn't just a place where you go once a year and forget. It's somewhere that is integrated into your life. As you can see, we have a list here of the different people. Through this Indian database that I told you that I had developed, I'm able to trace some of the people who are buried here. For example, Anna is a Wampanoag Indian, so that means she would have been one of that group of Indians who came from the Hudson Valley. Okay? And then there was also a Delaware child as well. I've been able to trace his parentage too. This is a list that was compiled in 1930 when the Moravians came up here. Bishop Reichel came here. They did an excavation on the Friedenshutten site, and he compiled this list from the diary. The reason they did the excavation in 1930 was because they wanted to build a historic village here, a recreation of Friedenshutten in the way in which it had been done in Gnadenhutten in Ohio, where the Indians had moved on to. Reichel even brought photographs of the buildings in Ohio and said, we can do this here in this field. Obviously that was unfortunately never done. But this is his work here, putting together the list of people buried here. So we've heard an awful lot about extraction, about resource extraction, but I just wanted to show you, this is a 3D topographical map with that map that Golkowski created draped over the landscape. So you can see here is Sugar Run, right here. Up here is where the liquid natural gas plant is going to be. There's no way you can miss it. There is no way that this valley is not going to be permanently scarred by the building of this thing. So one of the things I did, and you can, if you go to the presentation I made, this is actually linked to the live version. So in the same way that Brook created those overlay maps, right? So I did the same thing. I georectified the ancient map, the old map, and then I took the plans that were publicly available of the plant, and also georectified them and put them on the landscape here, so we can have a closer look to see exactly where this is going to be. Okay, so if you look, you can see there's actually 2 layers here. You've seen that historical map before, But if you look, you can see up there the Gottes Acker is within, well within the confines of the plant. All right? From their own plans. And this is a picture of what you can see again, the historical map layered on the landscape. And this time you can see not just the burial ground, which is within the confines of a liquid natural gas plant. You can see where we stood this afternoon by the monument. And you can also see, I hope, the contours of the storm drain, which is going to be built from the parking lot of the plant straight through the village down to the Susquehanna River. So this is pretty accurate, okay? This has been georectified. I've checked this with a colleague of mine who teaches in Muhlenberg College, who is he's a qualified archaeologist by the state of Pennsylvania, and he's also a GIS expert as well. So I sent him, I shared this with him, and he said, yep, that's about right. And so this is actually my last slide. I guess my question is, I'm not a resident here. I find this place fascinating. Its history grasps me. It was called the Jewel on the Susquehanna because it is a place where people live together harmoniously from very, very different backgrounds. And it is also about to be completely bulldozed. Some of it has been bulldozed already. I wanted you to hear the names of the people who were buried there, to know that there are people there. That when the archaeological survey was done for this plant, they deliberately did their drilling for the archaeological testing where they knew the Gottes Acker, the cemetery, was not. So I just want you to, I mean, I've spoken to the archaeologist who has worked with New Fortress. He's horrified. He's heard me speak about Friedenshutten elsewhere. He's horrified at what is about to be done. There just seems to be this fatalism which has gripped everybody, that because this is this huge company, nothing can be done. So I just urge us to think creatively about how to stop this and how to get at least some kind of mitigation from New Fortress Energy. I would reiterate what Brian said earlier. It seems the least that they could do would be to offer to create an interpretive center down on the field, which talks about environmental history as well as human history. To at least say, this is a place you should come visit, even though there is this monstrosity of a plant right next to it. Because I don't know if that can be stopped. It seems that all channels, I was in touch with the Pennsylvania Historical Commission, I've been in touch with DEP, you know, it's done. So I was leaving you with this slide as my last image, and I hope that with a very brief outline I've given you of this village and its importance, you realize how this touches me. And as I said, I encourage you to look through the chronicle of events at this village to show just what went on. A lot went on in that field by the Susquehanna. Thank you.
What you're going to do about this going right through town? If there's a crash, you're surrounded by people, houses, population, and aren't you concerned? And he says to me, it's a PennDOT issue. These are state roads. So he wants to put it on PennDOT. They don't want to get involved until, I suppose, there's a catastrophe. So we've already had, I said to him, you have already 2 dead drivers. They had to evacuate and shut down the roads for about 10 hours. People were evacuated, they had to leave their homes. for like half a day, and this is in the middle of the night.
The one in New York, we have a relative that lives near, they closed the school. There was a school right in the area, so they had to close school for the day.
Right, so that's when you usually have schools, could be nearby. So then what's happening here? How much will go in the rail line? I see the railroad train as I drove in, and I see all the silicone, the sand rails, and they're unloading the sand for the fracking. I had taken pictures of that maybe 3 years ago or so, and I went on the property and took pictures, and I was near the road. I got a letter from that railroad company. It's a railroad company, and they said, you are forbidden to ever go on our property. If you are, then we have to prosecute. So this time I took pictures from across the road, and I have like a, telescopic lens, a zoom lens, so I could zoom in. So this is what's going on, and still next to that daycare center, that early childhood school. And I remember complaining about it, and others complained about it years ago. How could you unload sand near that school? And they're still doing it. That means no elected official has intervened. So this is what we're dealing with. We, the citizens, have to protect ourselves and stand up for our own needs and our own protection, because we're the ones that we have elected. They're afraid to do anything. They're afraid to speak out. I've been arrested twice. I've been in court 11 times because of the gas industry, taking pictures, videos, and also bringing people to look at what's going on. I give tours. So one of the companies, Cabot, has a restraining order. They went to court and they put a restraining order on me for life. A permanent one, which means I must stay 100 feet from their sites because they consider me a danger. So I have to watch where I walk now. In my own county, there's 96 or 100 sites of Cabot. So, and I have to also watch where I walk on the driveway, where their driveways are. I can't go within 25 feet, and if I park on the road, I have to park 100 feet away. Otherwise, I'm in contempt, and they can take me to court, which they did a couple of times. And they claim I've crossed the line. So just like they spoke today about crossing the line, somebody spoke about crossing the line, and they had the police come by. So they're worried about the citizens exposing them, and meanwhile, what else can we do? Where are their elected officials? The governor's promoting it, and so we have to do something to expose it and to somehow help ourselves and slow down the industry. Right now I feel like they're doing less fracking in my county. It doesn't seem as heavy as it was years ago. And I really feel that even this project, they're so desperate to make money. They're not making as much money as they would like, that they have to export. So this is their latest plan. Let's get as much gas. We have a glut of gas. They don't have all the pipelines they want, so they have to use rail and truck. And let's take it out of the country and try and palm it off on other countries like Europe or Asia. But from what I've read also, Asia and even Europe are not that interested in American gas. They can get gas from Asia. They can get gas from Russia. So something like this, they're trying to do what they can to make money, but I think again, they will fall short. And they'll put $800 million into this plant, and then where will it go? What will be the profits for them? Usually what I see is the small group of people making a lot of money, and most of the investors are not going to make the money they think, and they just perpetuate this. But I feel like it's a dying art, or a dying venture, because of all the publicity that's negative now, all the things that are going on. People want to switch. They want alternatives, because this is right next to our homes. And as I saw when I drove today, where they've dug out, it's within like 100 feet of a house there on the Moravian Rd. It looked like 100 feet or a little more. So it's next to our homes, next to our schools, on our farms, and we can't have an energy like this. We need to have something different, something that's really clean and safe and not invasive like this. So I know that we can develop it. I know that the intelligence is out there, and there's so much research going on. that eventually this will be replaced. But meanwhile, they are scarring the land, as Brian says, and they're changing the landscape. And hopefully they can be stopped soon. So thank you. If you have any questions.
The compressed gas they put in these trucks, does that have the mercaptan in it?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, it does, because I smell the trucks when I go by. I smell the mercaptan.
Okay.
And I go to the site and I smell the mercaptan. I've had to complain several times. I always call the DEP whenever I see something. And I called several times. I said, I'm smelling mercaptan and I'm on the road. That should not be leaking to the houses that are across the road from this.
Well, if you're smelling mercaptan, it's probably got the gas with it too.
Yes, right. There's some kind of gas connected with it and there's some kind of leak. So DEP comes there periodically to check for leaks, and then it stops for a while, and then it may start again. But yeah, so I've smelled mercaptan even driving behind them. It's leaking out of the truck. I mean, it's like unbelievable. So the industry keeps trying to make money, and this maybe is their last venture, I think, with the LNG.
A couple of years ago, I read in the paper, and I think it was the Toronto paper, what these gas companies were paying our elected officials.
Mm.
And it really made an impression on me. Is there any way to find that out and make it public?
Yes, because any contributions, I went to my county seat, go to the election board, and you can ask, who are the contributors for your elected officials, especially since we just had an election. You can ask for all the contributors, and they'll give you the list, and you can see if there's any gas companies on the list. So, and then the amounts. So you can try that, and then make it public if you can.
They listed all the officials and what the companies
And you saw,
donated to them.
you mean you saw that happen, or you want to do it?
I saw that happen.
Oh.
I don't, yeah.
I know, I looked into it one time too. I saw that there were contributions to some of the officials in my county, yeah.
I think it was when Sherwood was governor. They said what they had donated to him.
Well,
So it's been a while.
it's been a while, right. So it's 10 years or more for our state. And like someone else mentioned, all the violations, I guess it was Lenker, what's his first name?
Brook.
Oh, Brook. Brook Lenker, mentioned all the violations. We have over 1,000 violations just in my county with DEP, and they just let them operate. I keep telling them, why do you let them operate when the Cabot alone has 900 violations? Can't you just shut them down? And they said, no, we can't. They just allow them to somehow rectify the situation. So we have water issues, we have air issues that are affecting people besides the traffic issues, the industrialization of the county. So hopefully, we'll live to see it stop. That's my goal. So I have a YouTube channel. I have almost 1,000 videos, videotape all different aspects of the industry and different meetings and different things that have happened. And that is just to do that. And then I did give tours. I've done hundreds of tours showing people from all over the world what they're doing to our landscape and our environment and our life. So all we can do is keep trying and doing our best and see what happens.
Thank you.
One thing I would like to thank is the guy that just stood up on the other side of the room. I think Brian needs a big hand of applause.
Thank you, Brian.
And one of the things that I've always said, and we did Earth Days a long time ago. 1970 was the first Earth Day, but we took a 10-year break on that.
Here's Czury from Springfield.
Thank you. I do a bit of traveling to art galleries, and I don't know if this is art.
No, but you can have the podium there.
Sometimes it would be regarded. And a fitting piece of sculpture, a cup of water. I'm going to read from a book I wrote. I'm from the back mountain area of Wilkes-Barre. and I was living down in Reading. And I kept hearing about this fracking issue, thanks to all of you. The noise was loud and necessary to catch media attention. And I thought, okay, it's time to go home. And I moved up to Springville and spent 2.5 years hitchhiking between Tunkhannock and Montrose, Route 29, conducting interviews. I heard the noise between the industry and you, but being from up there, I knew there were stories underneath the noise, and I wanted the stories. I didn't want the judgment. I didn't want the data. I didn't want the statistics. I just wanted the stories. I wanted to hear what the people were talking about. So in the course of 2.5 years hitchhiking Route 29, I got the stories from all directions. There's not just two sides to this issue. And I'll read some of, I call these docu-poems. They're poems written from the voices, and they're poems written from my observations. And unlike the young author, this old author has books for sale. A woman's body grows to resemble the rolling contours of the earth, and a man's face grows to resemble her stony crevices. This goes way back. A vision wrought with echoes, Abraham said in both the Bible and the Quran. The story has already been written in the insect trails under bark and stones, in the rippling night glow and morning chemtrails, in boot soles and tire treads. Story underneath the story, as trees be my witness, crawling out of its skin, a map water runs through. I'm here, and I've always been here, Springville, Joe's garage, across from the sit-o. Even though they told me life was elsewhere, slow string of cars behind tanker trucks, sun a yard above the trees, smell of diesel and fresh mowed grass. Even though they told me no matter how far I'd have to go to make myself here, with my ear against these hills, carbon exhaust plume from a dump truck swallows me as I'm writing in my pocket notebook. Never mind the trucks. Pickup trucks, dump trucks, tanker trucks, heavy equipment tractor trailers, oversized generator trucks, fresh water tanker trucks, residual water tanker trucks, Halliburton trucks, flatbed stone trucks, sand trucks, flatbed pipe trucks, flatbed oversized dozer trucks, cement trucks, PennDOT, township trucks, paver trucks, acid trucks, milk tankers, box trucks, tow trucks, thumper trucks, silica trucks, never mind the trucks. I mean, Christ, if we were talking about trucks, we'd never be gone. And 2 summers ago, there was a lull in the action. I was sitting out back. I live at the Springville schoolhouse. I'm sitting out back with the schoolhouse. I said to my friend Kim, I said, listen, cicada. We had not heard cicada in years. Last summer you could hear the cicada, and you could even hear the distinction between the crickets and the cicada. Now, forget it. There is such a, it's as bad now as it was in the beginning. All night, trucks, steady stream, daytime, steady stream, but mostly night. The action's at night. I realize that, working with this, on this project, there's three things I love in this. It comes down for me to three things. I love people working. I love people making money. And I love drinking water. And I don't know why in this simple life we can't have all three. That's what I vote for. I spent 15 years of my younger life hitchhiking North America. And to find money, I had to walk onto jobs. I know what it is to be an itinerant worker. And these guys coming up from Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, I know what that's like, to be far from home and just needing a job. At night, from the kitchen window, from the back field near the pond, from your truck swerving potholes, your story augurs deep through a tangle of roots, home or far from home, lit by a tower of stars, written in earth and water with flammable ink. Here's what scares us. We don't know what's going on. We know what's going on, but we don't know all of what's going on. We know what's going on, but we don't know who's doing it. I mean, we do know who's doing it, but we don't know who exactly is doing it. We don't know their names. We only know the company names. The why is obvious. It's the how that leaves us a lot of questions. Even though they explain it to us, even when their spokesman goes on TV, even when they parade their heavy equipment past our farmhouses at breakneck speeds, even when they let us watch from the fence in our cars, afraid to get out, especially when they come to our door with papers to sign. What scares us is their uniforms, their uniform trucks and their uniform masculinity, the uniform air of their unified occupation, the ununiformity of their money, uniform cash flow, ignitable youth with muscle, calling it water, and buying us off to drink. What scares us is we have laws to protect us, but they buy off the laws. They buy off the commissioners who regulate the laws that protect what we have to live with. They write the fine print loophole. I looked up loophole in the dictionary. It's a small opening through which small arms can be fired. The scary part is we know how to read. It scares us we don't know what to do. We don't know who to talk to about what scares us. We don't know who to contact. We don't have a number, and when we do, we get referred, we get rerouted, we get put on hold. We get frustrated when we start yelling, saying things we can't explain. That's what scares us, how angry we've gotten with no one to explain it will go away. It won't go away. Like it doesn't matter to anyone, except our neighbors when they used to be our friends, except our families when they used to be our friends, except our friends when we didn't live under occupation, especially our friends who signed and moved away. What scares us is our daughters. And then there's the pipeline. Living and saying hello during the occupation, it's an issue of gas. Everybody knows who signed, who didn't sign, how much they signed for, everyone. And the trucks, Well, I didn't tell anybody who I was. They just thought I was some guy who had a DUI where his car broke down. Nobody knew who I was. They just know on that stretch of road, you wouldn't be out there with your thumb if you didn't belong there. One of the most interesting questions I had to ask was, why did you stop? Why did you stop to pick me up? And one woman said, well, my dad used to hitchhike. So, and this old guy, probably know Bill here, he said, well, my son Billy used to hitchhike. So at that moment, at 40 miles an hour, 50, I don't know, 40, that's a good clip. I'm standing, at the moment the motorist sees me, I become that woman's father. Or the man sees me, I become his son. And that kind of transformation is mystical. It's wonderful. It's like who do you become? Who do you see when you're looking at something that makes you stop your natural course? It's a pipeline. You get to the pipeline at Dimmick, conversation always turns. Evening sky, diesel blue, purple tinge. Last of the sun burned white through a stand of maples past the drill rig, then rolled down over the hill. Hayfield mowed into rolls, slid up its gut, deep through the shoulder, pipelined. Tomorrow this gaping trench will be backhoed shut, leaving a long blood rose stem after bypass. If you were to tell me the patient has 100% chance of recovery, I'd plant carrots and onions, a long corridor of sweet corn and cabbages in the scar. End to end, the cemeteries are a feeding tube of bones blanched in the vapors of black poppies. What I want is what others around the world wanted and gave their lives for, to drink from your mouth and say, this is good. Climbing down into an excavated gorge, crow caws 3 times overhead. Stumbling over loose rock. Yesterday at this time, I was teaching students at the high school about inheritance. Digging in with the sides of my desert boots to keep balance. Not waiting around for someone to croak to get their dough, but what was handed you from your folks, these hills, cricks, and woods. Across lacerated bucket loader tread. For 2 days I watched the backhoe bang and chip at this swatch of rock. Step through and walk into. We own this. We don't own this. These are hard decisions between the haves and the used to haves. Night air sputters from the flare, a gas rig burn-off. Shadows of spindly trees spasm the side of a barn. Its weathered splints quicken the wavering tall grass. Before the gas came in, there was no change for years and years and years. That's one thing. It's beautiful country all around here. But that's all we got, and they're tearing it up. I grew up right down the road from here. The gas was the best thing to happen. They say it messes up the water, but people had messed up water before they came. Sulfur in the water, that's gas. I worked at pointing this farm up here, and that farm pointing at another was a chicken farm. When someone wanted one, I'd go in there and wring their necks, swinging them around. I know this one guy was told to clean out the back of one of their tankers. When he got home, his hands were all burning. People used to light their faucets before the gas came here. Used to go out into the swamp and throw lit matches into the water. You can drain down your well for that murky water. Three young teen girls in pink t-shirts are wandering the side of the road, the length of town and back. It's not their story I'm after. It's what's surrounding their story. Not the tune, but what's carrying the tune. Writing everything their story isn't in order to define its contour. As they climb the hill opposite to the trees, like young deer, one looks at me and smiles. Three pretty pink deer. A synchronistic noise that becomes the tune. The way Count Basie plays it, the poof of the hot air balloon, the poof of the gas rig burn-off flare. With Shopping Creek slitting its tongue through earthy grass banks, a pipeline culvert. Weathered barn silo parallel the gas rig tower. As trucks make tremendously wide turns off the highway onto my road, never mind the trucks. 721, my three pink deer are galloping. The juxtaposition is phenomenal. We took a hot air balloon, let Kowalski, the filmmaker, Drill Baby Drill, Kimberly Crafton, Janelle Pointer, and me went up one morning. And the flare that blows up the gas rig, or the hot air balloon, parallel to the gas rig, the flare, and the creek. I said to the guy, he said, I never saw any of this before like this. I said, you don't take people up over the gas? They said, no, you're the first people I took over the gas. So I was always afraid to go over the gas, because if the balloon gets caught up in the flare, and he said, how far do I have to go with my balloon above a flare without getting incinerated? Janelle knew this. You have to go twice the size of the flare to get up beyond. I recommend that. You want to know what's happening in your, just go up in a hot air balloon. I'll end. It's been a long day. It's been an informative day. I want to end with a river poem. This is the first time any of this happened. You probably know this. The Susquehanna River is the third oldest river on this planet. There's the Fink River over in Oceana. There's the Muse River. It's tied with the New River, which is down south from here. But I asked there's only one girl at one time in my audience. I said, how did you know this? And I said, she raises her hand. I said, how do you know that? Homeschooled. That compression station in Springfield did blow.
It did?
It did, about 2 years ago. We felt it in the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse is a huge brick building, and it was like somebody slammed their car into the side of it. Cemetery Road leads to the Boneyard. Bear Valley Road, the nudist colony. Orphan School Road to the academy. Poor Farm Road. When the compressor station over the hill blew, it felt like a car slammed into the house. Windows for 5 miles billow of black smoke, with an invisible wall of gas rumored toward my old high school Again, failing science, lighting a smoke with a Bunsen burner. This getting old, oh, who's talking about? Somebody was talking about this. All right, this is two more. This getting older thing, here's something I know, the way water in its own scaly time cuts through rock. One way to tell is cut it in half, count the rings. Another way is to press your ear to it. Better yet, with a glass to your ear, you can hear every word spoken on the other side. The trees have been doing this with their roots. The insects underneath the bark, scrawling it down. There isn't a boy my age who didn't get an erector set for Christmas when he was 8, and praised for this silver nut and bolt towers in the shape of these gas rigs. Yeah, it was us who constructed these gas rigs with our erections and pissing contests in the creek. I can't leave on that one. I should, but I won't. This is what we were doing today, and this is I'll leave you with this, is because this is what I've been doing with you tonight. Opening a tremendous silence between us. I measure inheritance in the tone of your voice, underneath that certain look. What was it we were promised? A particular gesture traced back to, what was it we had to let go? Someone somewhere recognizable a long time ago. Where in the Bible does it say unconditional? I read the newspapers. Was there something eating you from what you didn't get last time? Here, I give you everything I've found since a boy. A few hard-placed words, and this moment, listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take my answers off the air.